I have a habit of trying to like draw analogies from like everyday life to stand-up comedy, or like metaphors to stand-up comedy. Like in high school, you're trying to fit in. So it's the equivalent of like trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Like if you're not being yourself and you're trying to like adapt who you are to a certain group, like if you're forcing it, you're not going to fit in.
Yeah, it's like if you go to a black room and you start going, "What's up, y'all? What's up?" If you don't talk like that, it's not.
What you mean?
Yeah, what's cracking, y'all? Like if you don't, like I don't talk like that, so I'm not gonna like. I'll just go up, be myself, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you know, you just gotta be your authentic self and not. Because that comes from fear, and that's what that is. It's just like you're afraid of being judged for what you are, which is the most high school thing ever. You're afraid of being judged for who you are, and you try to like appease whoever's in front of you at that moment. Everybody you went to high school with has a job now, like they're members of society. You don't want to be like getting, knocked out by some doctor and be like, all right, count backwards from 100. And you're like, didn't I do whippets with this guy? Like, what is this?
You can't laugh at that.
We're trying to figure out date night. We love each other very much. We're still talking, still asking each other questions. And she asked me a question that she's never asked me before. She said, who'd you go to prom with? And I said, I was too afraid to ask anybody in high school. I was a shy kid, really scared, so I went to prom by myself. I didn't ask anybody. And my best friend Blake was too afraid to ask anybody, so he went to prom by himself. And Blake asked me for a ride to prom. And when I told her that, it was the first time I realized I went to prom with a dude. And that whole night started making so much more sense, because I thought everybody was congratulating me for being so brave to go solo, but they all just thought I was gay. So I'm on the dance floor and people are coming up to me like, oh my God, I'm so glad you came out. I'm like, I know, me too. We always knew that I'm a lone wolf, sure. It's a weird time for me in high school. I was a weird, awkward kid, very introverted, and I was a religious kid too. I was the creepy religious kid, I think, in my high school, which you never want to be. I didn't have lunch with any of my friends. We didn't have the same lunch periods. So instead of eating alone, I would go in my car and read the Bible by myself. Like, nothing makes you look more like a school shooter than doing religion by yourself. Like, it's creepy. It was a sad time for me.
Who you heard right there was our guest on today's episode of You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topics that aren't funny and talk about why they are funny. Joining us, as always, is, of course, Steve Mers. Steve, hello.
How are we?
I'm good. My cat, I think, is good. Probably, I put a plant over here, so she's going to be going after that the entirety of this episode. So, yeah, that's very exciting. That's like the most exciting thing that's happened in quarantine. And also joining us today, the voice you just heard was our guest, Cristian Duran. Cristian, how goes it?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's going well. Good to see you guys. I appreciate you having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely, man. Cristian, of course, is a New York City comedian. He's been featured at festivals all over the country. He has been a semifinalist in the New York Comedy Festival's annual New York's Funniest competition. In 2016, he released the debut episode of your animated cartoon show, Future Hall of Famers. It screened at several film festivals. And last year, your debut album, King Latifah, came out and hit that coveted number one spot on iTunes.
We made it.
Quite a journey you've been on over the last few years, huh?
Yes, this is my Inside the Actor Studio moment now.
Yes.
And then there was King Latifah.
Critically acclaimed.
Your simmering portrayal of a comedian, of an introverted weirdo in high school.
And you summarized that very well in that point, eating lunch in your car in high school. How did that play into your becoming a comedian?
Yeah, I guess so. You know what's funny? I was thinking about this topic of high school, and I always just liked being funny and having funny friends. I was never like popular, obviously. Like I was like really invisible in high school. And I remember I had a friend who was on, like, I had a friend who was like on the football team, and I had nerdier friends, and I had like friends in different echelons of the high school strata. But like none of them like hung out with each other. So I remember two of them after high school, like had just bumped into each other and they were talking, and then they had relayed this story to me. They said that they ended up talking about me, and they said, "Oh, he's like a really awesome indie band." and of a person. And I was like, oh, that kind of like makes sense of like, as a dude, it's just like, yeah, nobody knows me, but like if you do, you'll be rewarded. And as arrogant as that sounds, I was like, that kind of sums it up. But I always felt like, yeah, like I'm like pretty funny. I don't know if I'm like hilarious, but then I was in college and I started doing these like creative writing classes. And then one of them, like a couple of them, you had to do personal essays. So I just wrote stories about my life, and I would, we would workshop them, and you would get back notes, and then people would just write on my paper like, hilarious, this is so funny, this is so funny. And I was like, I feel like I've always been pretty funny. Like, let me try it out. Like, I was like, let me go to an open mic and just say this stuff, memorize this stuff, and then say it out loud. And if it works the first time, I feel like I can do this forever. So I did, and it did, and here I am, years later.
Was this in New York?
No, I was in Florida. I grew up I was born in Brooklyn, moved to Florida, raised there, and then I went to, and then after college, I went back to New York to kind of like do stand up, and also just wanting to live in New York. So I got back there.
Nice. Okay. So you went up the first time, you had some jokes hit.
Yeah.
What was that like the first time? Tell me about your first time in vivid detail.
Well, her name was Tanya. It was weird. It was interesting because I was so nervous. I was like preparing to do it. I was telling my friends. I told my friends that I had already done it for like a year before I had, because I was like, if I just keep lying about this, I'm gonna have to do it eventually. So I was like lying to like force myself into having to do it. And I was, I just remember like I was working at a restaurant, and they were like, oh, we don't need you today. So I was like, all right. And I was just sitting around like, dude, I gotta like make money. I gotta like make a future or a life for myself somehow. I gotta do something. So I started like writing the jokes down, like preparing this like 5-minute set. I listened to this like Jerry Seinfeld tape or old CD. It's called Seinfeld on Comedy. I don't know. There's a George Carlin one and a Jerry Seinfeld one. I listened to the Jerry Seinfeld one, and he was talking about his first Tonight Show. And he basically said that like he had rehearsed this whole bit and memorized it, and was like, if you had punched me in the face while I was doing it, I still could have done it, because I knew it back and forth. And I was like, once I made the decision to do comedy, I was like, all right, if I go up the first time and bomb because I'm not prepared, it'll be so unfair to my attempt. So I was like, let me memorize it and not, at least I'll know what to fucking say up there. I'm sorry, can I curse on that?
Yeah, we can't laugh at that. We can't.
But yeah, so long story even longer. I was, I'd rehearsed this thing. I rehearsed my 5 minutes, and then like a week before I wanted to actually go up, I went to the open mic, and there was a bunch of people there, and like Austin's coffee shop, and they brought up this one dude, and he was bad, another guy who was bad, and then the third guy came up, and they're like, this next comic, man, he's been killing it all over town, all this, that, like he's been doing it for a year. It's like, he's really getting there, man. This is one of Orlando's best. And then he comes up and he bombs and he eats it. And I was like, oh, all right, I got this. I'm like, if he's their best, and I think I at least have a shot, maybe. And so I went up the next week, and it was like pretty good. If I watched it back now, it'd be awful. There's just no way it was good. But like for that night, it looked like I knew what I was doing. And the funny thing was, the next night I went up to a different bar, called the Other Bar, and it's like a pack. That was like the awesome open mic in Orlando. That was like a real show. So I went up there, and I put my name on the list, and I was like towards the end, and they were like, all right, we're running out of time. So you're going to have to cut it down to 3 minutes when you get up there. And there's 2 people after you. And I was like, I've only practiced 5 minutes and I don't know how to cut it down. Like it's either 5 minutes or nothing. And I just, so I went up there and they started giving me the light at like 2 minutes. I just kept going because I didn't know how to stop. Yeah. And I just kept going. And like, they had to like shut off the mic basically to get me off. And I wasn't like doing well or anything. I just couldn't stop. And then the host came on stage and was like, all right, we ran out of time. The open mic's done. So I just totally like destroyed 2 people's nights who had to go on after me.
They waited the whole time.
Dude, it was like the highest of highs the first night and then the lowest of lows the second night. It was like so awful.
But that highest the highs balanced it out because obviously you had it.
Oh my God, that first time I was like, I got home and I had to go like run on the treadmill because I was just so jacked up. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. It's helpful. Like there's that quote, and I heard this on a podcast today, comparison is the thief of joy. But like sometimes that can drive you. Like when you see people who are just not doing well.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like in your own head, you're like, should I do this? Like, when am I going to do this? Is tonight the night? And then you see the best in the city bomb. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, no, okay, cool. Like,
well, it's important to see that like, there's a little bit of like, it's not as hard as you think it is, but it's not as easy. Like, I don't know it's not as easy as you think it is, but it's also not as hard as you think it is. Like you shouldn't, like if you go to sometimes like I would be, sitting at home and be like, oh my God, like there's comedy clubs that aren't, that don't book me that like, it's Thursday night and they're probably packed and I wish I could be there. And you go on a Thursday night, it's like 3 people and you're like, oh, it's like, it's not as grand as it is in your head. And it's also not as, awful as it is in your head. So
yeah.
No need to be intimidated.
Romanticize it.
Yes, exactly. Your mind can be your own worst enemy in terms of like what you think you can or can't do.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that too. I mean, you see people getting booked on shows, and it's like, why am I not booked? Why am I not on that show? Like, I deserve that show. But it's people who are like have like years of experience, and they're like,
and also it's like it's you play a different instrument. They play tuba, and they needed a tuba that night. They play clarinet. So it's all fine. It's all good, man.
Right. There's enough for everybody.
Yeah, that's the fallacy everybody thinks is like, there's not enough spots. And like, I don't know. There's plenty of comedy everywhere. There's a show somewhere. There's shows right down the street from the Comedy Cellar. Trust me.
Right. This isn't the 80s where it's like there's 3 networks and there's 3 shows that you can get on, and that's it.
We're all trying to get on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
You get on the Tonight Show once you're a star.
Some people have this attitude like, oh, it's just an open mic. But for me, I've always tried super hard at open mics, but it's always like it always led to getting booked, and then getting booked makes you better, and then it kind of feeds into itself. So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. And did you guys start in Cleveland or
mm-hmm.
Right. How are the open mics there? Are they like packed? Are like people, or is it like kind of sad?
There are a good amount of both. We're lucky to have over the years, we're lucky to have had a lot of shows that are kind of hybrid open mic showcase type thing. Like you have like a weekly show. It's a showcase, but you can get on.
Yeah.
Even if you're not booked, and it's packed.
Right.
But then you have all your sad open mics too. So it's a good mix. I think it's good.
Yeah. I think that's like the best place to start and like being an open mic. Cause like when I started in Orlando, that's kind of how it was. Like the open mic, there's like an open mic at the Orlando Improv, and you can get up there and there's like tons of people or whatever. But like when I came to New York, it's like, it's just comics in the room. And I was like, this is not how you want to start comedy. It's like, this is no way to get a gauge on if your material is going to work with like 3 other people in the crowd who are trying to do the same thing as you, who are on their phone the entire time, not listening. And you're like, man, like I remember I had like, there's like 2 or 3 like bit ideas that I tried to do at a New York open mic that got a 0.0. And then later on I would see like somebody's like John Mulaney's special or like, a Chris Rock special where they had a very similar like premise. And I was like, damn it, I was on the right track. Are you serious? Like I gave that up.
Yeah.
The good thing about that is you have a joke where it goes, you see something on TV and you're like, well, I can't use that, but also you get the reassurance of going,
exactly
it's something that could be on TV, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you at least get the confidence boost.
Right.
Like a year later after you threw it out.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah, that's why like you can't judge a bit off of those open mics, you know.
Yeah.
Work on it, sure. But also I find like Steve runs a mic where if I get like 2 laughs in a 5-minute set,
yeah,
I'll focus on where those laughs came from and why. Was it just like I played to the back of the room, I played to the comics? Because you can't get too wrapped up in that either.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those jokes don't work at an audience. So I become comfortable with the silence at mics like that and like how to work out my nerves that are telling me, get off stage, like you're bombing, this is terrible. But it's like, how am I going to get better if this doesn't happen? Like,
right. Yeah. And that's what those mics, that's what New York mics are the best at. They get you comfortable with silence. It's actually a really useful skill because it's like, you know, if it gets a little quiet for a little too long, you got to be okay with it and just like either go into the next thing or just fucking just exist in the silence and just be thoughtful for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good tip. Speaking of awkward silence, high school. You mentioned in that in that bit that we played, you know, you're awkward, you're introverted, you were religious. So, you know, was there? I mean, you said you always enjoy like making people laugh. Like, was there ever a time that you remember specifically in high school making a room full of people laugh and thinking, oh, this is nice, this is cool?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't like, it's a little overstated on the album about like how religious I was. I was like religious after 9/11. I got like into like the book of Revelation. So I was like, uh-oh, shit is going down. We got like 2 days left on this planet. So I was like that and just getting into it. But I'm trying to think like the biggest one I can remember was like in English class. I remember, we were talking about, it's like Othello or something like that. We were talking about somebody getting stabbed. And I don't know how my teacher allowed me to do this or even thought that I would be good for this. She was like, Christian, would you like to demonstrate how a stabbing would work or something? Which now in retrospect sounds racist as hell. Yeah. But I remember I was like, we locked eyes and she knew I wanted to do it. And I just got up and like prison stabbed somebody and like threw whatever pen or whatever I held at somebody else in the room to like, oh, here, hold this while I walk away. And that got like a huge laugh. And I was like, that's the kind of shit. I still remember it to this day, like almost like 20 years later. I'm like still eating off that story. I was like, so nice. I fucking unfollowable.
Yeah. No matter what happens in my life, I'll always have Othello.
I don't care if Eddie Murphy came in right after, he couldn't have followed.
Steve, did you ever have a moment like that? Like, what were you like in high school? How would you describe yourself? And did you ever?
You know, what's hilarious is I was actually ready for a story because that reminded me of a story I did because in my English class, like we had these reports that we had to do orally, and it was like, no, I just wouldn't do them because I was so introverted and so fucking scared of going in front of the class that I would just flunk English. All together, just completely tank the class because I just didn't want to do that shit. And then the weird thing was some girl in that class, like some weeks after the reports were done, everybody was done giving their reports. And she was like, she looked over. At first I thought she was hitting on me. I think she was joking and she was probably making fun of me, but it was like, she was like, I had this dream that like you were in my dream and you were talking to a bunch of people. And I was like, at the time, I'm like, wow, she's thinking about me in her dreams. But then in retrospect, I'm like, oh, she's making fun of how like I am afraid to talk in front of people or something. I don't know. It seemed genuine. It didn't seem sarcastic and there was nobody there to laugh at it. So it's hard to gauge what the intent was there. But I just find it completely ironic that, you know, years later, I'm like, I have to talk in front of people and I want to do public speaking up to 3 nights a week, 3 times a night, up to 5 times a week, 6 times a week. And I love doing it now. It's very odd.
Could she have been seeing your future?
That's what I was also thinking. I'm like, was it a premonition? But
well, it sounds like she was hitting on you, dude. She's like, hey, can you talk more, stupid? I really want to talk to you.
Yeah, I was painfully virgin at the time. So, doesn't,
I totally get where you're coming from with like not doing assignments like that. I remember there was one, I had a science class and we had to build a bridge out of popsicle sticks. And the idea was that they were going to like put like this huge weight on the popsicle sticks, and whoever's bridge, lasted the longest under enormous amounts of weight would, get an A or whatever. It's the idea was just like bridge building and physics and all this stuff. But the teacher was like, all right, so build it on your spring break and then come back afterwards and we'll do that. And I was like, I'm not fucking doing homework on spring break. Fuck you.
Right.
So I just didn't do it. And he called me up and called me up in class and was like, so you didn't do the project? I was like, no. And he's like, how come? I was like, because it's in spring break. I'm like, I don't ask you to grade papers. And he's like, but I do. I was like, but I didn't ask you to.
It's a break. We're taking a break.
It's like, I'm not going to, but I still got a C in that class somehow. It was a huge project too.
In the back of his head, he was like, oh, he's right.
He's right. Son of a bitch.
Is it like balsa wood or spaghetti? Like one of ththose?
Just these like, I don't know, popsicle sticks.
Yeah.
I don't know what his idea was. Oh, it was toothpicks. That's what it was. It was purely out of toothpicks. And I was like, I'm going to fucking buy a bunch of toothpicks for you.
Right.
So high school can be a polarizing topic for some people because some people had, it's a formative period of our lives where we're trying to figure ourselves out. And there are some people who figure themselves out by tearing down other people. Because they don't know, it's all human beings just feeling their way through life without having a lot of information. And so like some people obviously would use status and use, just make other people feel bad about themselves so they felt better. And obviously, that's a big reason why a lot of people don't want to talk about high school. I have a friend of mine. She's ironically enough a friend from high school. We still stay in contact, and there are like sometimes like we start telling stories about high school, and she's like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, and I get it because she had a negative connotation with high school. So do you like how would you describe high school in hindsight? Like obviously you do it on your album a little bit, and as a comic you've moved on or at least found funny in it. So.
I know. I kind of look at it as like, I don't have like any kind of PTSD about it or anything. I just more look at it. I just wanted to be out when I was there. I would skip class all the time, and not to like do anything, not to do like drugs or smoke cigarettes or anything. I just didn't want to go. I was like, this is a waste of time. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I'd rather sit at home and play Zelda fucking 64, like Ocarina of Time. Wasted a whole day one time looking for the fake Triforce on the internet one day. But like, I just didn't want to be there. But like now in retrospect, I was like, I go, man, if I had my brain now, it would have been so fun. Like if I knew that it didn't matter in any way or like didn't give a fuck what people thought by any means, just talk to whoever, slapped whoever I wanted to. It would have been the shit. Like just not being afraid to get in a fight with anybody or like just even to talk shit to anybody or because I didn't want to get in trouble or anything. Like just get a detention. Who cares? Like it's fine. I wish I would have known that kind of stuff because it's basically the message of Ferris Bueller. Just like fucking don't give a shit about high school because the less you give a shit about it, the more fun you'll have.
Right.
We went to high school at a time when detention actually meant something because now kids can just go on their phone and no, I don't think they're allowed to probably.
I'm sure they're not, but still like how do you stop them?
Right. Yeah.
Take their phones. Can they do that?
Yeah. I also think I would have been a cooler kid if I had social media for the very thing. Like I would have probably like tweeted something kind of charming in high school because I was too afraid to like say it in class. And then people would be like, "Oh, dude, I saw what you posted last night." Or I would just been violently bullied.
You just fantasize about what tweet you would have said.
Yeah, exactly. And they would have been like, "Nerd, fucking kill yourself." I'm like, "Oh, all right."
Yeah, you say
I probably would have been that kid. Yeah.
You say it'd been great to have my brain now back then, but then you go back there and you find
You're
out
like, I'm equally, yeah. I'm just way lamer.
Oh man, yeah. What about you, Steve? Hindsight, like,
oh yeah, same thing.
What would you do if you could go back to high school with your brain today?
Oh, try harder, but also why at the same time? Like I could do much better because I would realize that like my lack of patience was kind of like, you have so much time ahead of you that this doesn't matter as much as I felt like it was wasting my time at the moment. Even though I was a kid and I was like, yeah, I'm wasting my childhood away with this high school bullshit. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think I would have made more friends. I'm more sociable now than I was. A lot of things.
Yeah, I think that's not care about what other people think. Like this doesn't matter. I think that's a common thread with a lot of people. Even though like, I know my parents tried to tell me that anytime I would get down about like somebody else's opinion of me, it doesn't matter. It means everything is so magnified back then because that's all you have. Like your world is so small that every little thing just seems so much bigger.
Well, yeah, I mean, people go through that now. It's like if you have a day job, that's your whole world. It's the exact same thing. It's just like, oh my gosh, like they're gonna cut me out of the lunch fucking club. I don't know what they do at offices, but like a lunch club, yeah. But like I can't sit at that table. It's like everybody at this table is going to be in this town forever. Don't worry about it. Like, I have this bit on my album about. It is just crazy about like. Everybody you went to high school with has a job now. Like they're members of society. And like I went to high school with a kid named Eric and who's like a mess, did a lot of drugs, moved in with his like a drug dealer because he got kicked out of his parents' house, tons of shit. And they had this party because they were getting evicted from their house. So they have a party to celebrate as you would. And I'm at the party and Eric is drunk and he has like, there's like this glass window pane on the ground. And he picks up the glass and he goes, "I fucking hate this glass," and just breaks it over his head. And blood everywhere. We had to take him to the hospital that night. He had 15 stitches. And like he still has a scar to this day. Like he's a pilot now. Like it's just like crazy. Like he's almost an astronaut. Like we rely on him every day to ferry us safely across the fucking country and the world. And he's a maniac. You don't you don't want to be like getting, knocked out by some doctor and be like, all right, count backwards from 100. And you're like, didn't I do whippets with this guy? Like, what is this?
I'd rely on him to feed me gas.
Yeah. You might want to.
I'm sure that's what you meant. But
oh, these are grown-up whippets. Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, because everybody comes into their own at their own time. Like,
yeah.
There was this, I went to a private high school, and like anytime anybody did anything that was like bad, you could tell the teachers were like, "Oh, that kid's not going to amount to anything." Meanwhile, he's like, on the inverse of what you're saying. Like, meanwhile, he's, a doctor now, or he owns his own real estate company.
Right.
Like people develop at different times. This expectation of leaving high school at 18 and knowing what you're going to do with your life and having your shit together. It's like, what world do you live in?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the guidance counselors at my wife's school told her that she was they're like, you should just prepare for minimum wage jobs now. Yeah. And now, so she's like the senior, she's like a VP of HR in a big company now. She's making way more than this guidance counselor, I can assure you. But like, it is what it is. Like, you don't know what people are made of back at that time. So,
no.
But if you went to high school, my high school, I did know what you were made of, and you were still at that high school. So,
yeah. I wonder what I wonder what's worse. I mean, I guess it depends on the person and what they say, but like, I don't know if like discouragement is the best thing, but also like if it fed into her psychology and made her work harder, that could be a good thing. I don't know.
That's something. Yeah, I know that's true. Cause it's like that's something that could cripple somebody emotionally. Like you don't know. It's like that's either going to motivate you to the top or like just stunt you if you like actually believe that about yourself. So. Well, I lucked out, or she lucked out.
I definitely don't get motivated by people talking down to me. I feed into that. But also, it's weird, though, because personal failure, though, makes me better at things. But other people telling me, like, I'm a loser does not have a positive impact on me.
Oh, really?
Like, it's, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of the opposite, I guess. I just kind of it's funny. I remember I was working at a restaurant in Florida, and when I was leaving to move to New York, I remember specifically one dude. He had like a lazy eye, and he goes like it was like out of a movie. He goes, "You'll be back," and I just go like in that situation. Whenever somebody says something like that, I just go, "Yeah, you're probably right." You're probably right. And then I obviously never came back, but it's just it's like, if that guy needs that, then I'll give it to, I'll allow you to have that. You can have it. We're never going to talk again. It'll be fine.
Who am I to ruin your day?
Exactly. Like you'll be here. I'm moving on and, just enjoy it. And I'll allow, if it helps you sleep at night that I'm coming back, just hold on to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny to see. And in that guidance counselor's case, like people have this habit of like putting their experiences onto you so that you'll be back.
That's true.
Guy, like if he were to ever leave, he would probably have in the back of his mind, like, I'm probably going to go back. So
yeah, that's true. And people do that in comedy too, where they're like, oh, you shouldn't talk about that stuff. And what they're saying is like, you shouldn't talk about that stuff or do the show that you're doing or do the jokes that you're doing because I tried and it didn't work. It's like, it's basically it. And, fuck it. You just got to do what you got to do.
Right.
Do what's right for you.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's opinion is based from their perspective and you can't take it too personally. But, when it comes to that in high school, like some people would take that feedback from that counselor and use that to drive them. But other people, it would totally shut them off. And that's the beauty of of existence, man. Like, everybody takes everything differently. That's what's so cool about a joke is because if you can get an entire room to laugh at that joke, everybody's laughing at it for a different reason based off of their own experience, and their own perspective, which is so cool to me.
Yeah. I mean, it is really like just one of the greatest things. I remember when I first started, just like the idea of like trying to manipulate a couple words to be like, all right, I just want to get what's in my head into your head. And that laugh of recognition, when it gets there, you're like, this is this is the money. Because if you're like a kid, I don't know how you guys are. Steve, you obviously said it, but like if you're like an introverted person and you get that reaction of like recognition of like acknowledging something is true that is, that you thought you were alone in. It's like the shit. You're like, oh, I'm not so weird after all. I'm not so alone after all.
For sure. I think the weird thing about comedy is this is kind of unrelated to what we're talking about, but like, it's weird how like you have the potential to do anything with comedy. Like you can literally, like, it's up to you. You can literally say the funniest thing that's ever been said, but you got to think of it first. But it's like you can do it. It's possible. You just have to like, I don't know. It's weird. It's just weird how it's like right there, but you still have to like make it happen.
Yeah, you have to put in the work.
It gives you a lot of like hope, but you also have to like, follow through with it.
That's true. It does takes a lot of just
brain work.
I mean, brain work. Yeah. Like there's guys that can just like go up there and riff and stuff. And I one friend of mine who's like just particularly good at it. I'm just in awe of that. But like, I heard Neil Brennan talk about it one time. He's like, my talent is that I work hard. And I was like, yeah, that I get that. It's like my superpower is that I work really hard. It's like, I kind of write that sometimes of like, you're not good enough to not work hard when it comes to stand up. So
I feel like riffing is one of those things where it's kind of like Luke Skywalker with the thing over his head and you can't see what he's doing. But you just have to trust yourself to do it without knowing where it's going to go. I mean, obviously it's a skill too, or just like you were saying, like it's just kind of like an innate ability or whatever. I don't know if it's innate. I don't know. But it's just kind of half of it, I think, is people are just like clam up at the thought of it. And so when they try to do it, it can be very difficult. And then they'll be like, I don't think I'm good at that. But really, it's just about relaxing.
Yeah,
and calming
really
your brain down on stage.
Yeah, if you're not the kind of person that goes, hey, what are you guys black? You guys, what are you guys, Indian or something? If you're not that person in real life, it's like, and you try to do that, it's not going to work. You really just have to be authentically yourself. And I noticed the time I'm kind of, I'm like fairly almost at fault, like polite in social situations, like polite to a fault. So I feel like when I'm like that on stage, I can kind of get a good reaction and like riff because I'm just like, I'll ask somebody, can I ask you if you're dating, or like, I don't want to offend you. Like when I'm like that normally, like if I do that on stage, I can tell it'll be okay. Like they'll kind of forgive me because I'm not trying to be like, what are you guys, leses? What are you guys scissoring? Like, because I would never say that to somebody in real life. Like if you're just, if you're kind of authentically there, and I've talked to one of our friends who's like, sometimes it's just like, there's just something in the room. There's like some kind of like a fog in the room that like everybody picks up on. And like, if you can just tap into that and say the exact thing that everyone's thinking at that exact same time, it's magic and it's money, but you really got to be dialed into how the room's feeling and, have everybody trust you at the same time.
I agree with that, being authentic. I think that's the easiest way for anybody to do comedy is not try to go against your own natural grain. If you can tap into what you're good at, I think you'd be so much better with so little effort compared to trying something different where, you can develop that skill, but you're going to be working so much harder to get to the same amount of like comedic, ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what you were saying earlier, Steve, about, believing in yourself, like that comes with the work. It comes easier, like knowing what angle you're going to take on a joke, that comes easier the more work you put in. Like you create, these new neural pathways where it's just the ease of coming up with a punchline. Like you come up with a premise, you're like, oh, that's really funny, but I don't know how to communicate that with people. The more time and effort that you put into it, the quicker that'll come. And the more comfortable you are with yourself as a performer, like, your voice, who you are on stage. And Cristian, like you were saying, like when it comes to crowd work, like, when somebody's trying to be funny versus, when somebody's being themselves and being in the moment.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to try to be funny because it's like, quick, come up with something funny. But if you're in a conversation with somebody, which is what you're doing with crowd work, and you're like, quick, say something funny, the people that are going to be with you aren't going to hang out with you much longer because it's like, oh, great, here's Cristian who's trying to be funny again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like, just, if you're just honest on stage, if you just, however you're feeling, you should probably say it. Because it'll get some kind. If you don't feel good about the set, then it might even help you to say that you don't feel good about it. Just being honest. I remember one time it was a comedy club that I've done in Connecticut before, and it's like a packed room. They like paper the room, so it's always just like an awesome show. They're always like just 150, 200 people in that room. And it's just always good. They're just always there to have a good time. And I'd done it before like twice, and it was just like a good time. I had good sets every time. And I came on stage and the whole show was going well. And for some reason, this is not something I ever say, but I just look at the crowd, I was like, I think this is going to go well. And it got this huge laugh. And I was like, I was like, why did I just say that? And I was like, because I felt it. Because I was like, I think this is going to go well. And it did. And
That's awesome.
It worked out. Yeah, it was like, it helped it too. It helped the set because right then they were excited about what was coming, and I could just go in there and be like, I think this stuff usually works, so let's just have fun with it. And it's just just worked out. So
yeah, just establishing that you're on the same wavelength with everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
That's one way.
Yeah, or if something's in the room, it's like somebody got kicked out earlier. Always mention that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whatever's going on.
That's interesting too, because I mean, if you think about being in high school, like that's the last thing that you're comfortable with, because you don't know who you are, you don't know like what you believe, you don't know like your voice. So being authentic and like drawing attention to, oh, that didn't go well, like that's scary.
Yeah, and you dwell on everything. You dwell on the stuff that, like, you know, I still think about when I was in 3rd grade and like I peed my pants in front of the class. Yeah, you just go like I wouldn't want to see any of those kids again. Like as adults, I just like sometimes I'll be brushing my teeth. I'm like, oh man, I fucking peed my pants in that class. Like at this age, it's just no one is thinking about that. No one has considered that in years and years, unless I go to my reunion. They're like, oh, you're the kid that pissed his pants, aren't you? But yeah, it's again about just not giving a shit about high school, just being able to just, you know, walk through it and breeze through it without, you know, dwelling on it too much, and just having fun. If you can extrapolate yourself from the situation or the experience as much as you can, and just kind of look outside of yourself, you'll have a much better time.
Yeah. I never made the connection. I have a habit of trying to like draw analogies from like everyday life to stand-up comedy, or like metaphors to stand-up comedy. And just like in high school, you're trying to fit in. So it's the equivalent of like trying to be funny. Yeah. Like if you're not being yourself and you're trying to like adapt who you are to a certain group, like if you're forcing it, you're not going to fit in. Just like, you know, you've got, of course you have to like meet the audience where they are. Sure. Yeah. But if you're forcing it, you're never going to connect.
Yeah. It's like if you go to a black room and you start going, what's up, y'all? What's up? If you don't talk like that, it's not.
What you mean?
Yeah. What's up, Cleveland? What's cracking, y'all? Like if you don't, like, I don't talk like that. So I'm not going to like, you know, drop my A's and stuff, like, you know, I'll just go up, be myself. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, you know, you just got to be your authentic self and not, because that comes from fear. And that's what that is. It's just like you're afraid of being judged for what you are, which is the most high school thing ever. You're afraid of being judged for who you are. And you try to like appease whoever's in front of you at that moment, rather than just go like, look, dude, if you're white and you accept that you're like not black whatsoever in a black room, they'll love you. That's it. If you like, you'll become the mascot, as Bill Burr once said. They'll love you and just be like, hey, I'm token white guy in this room. They're like, all right, you go ahead. They'll give you a break.
So do you think that one of the reasons why high school brings traumatic memories or, you know, negative feelings with people, is it because that the same elements are at play still every day in everybody's life? People trying to be who they aren't to get something, or to win approval, or to not get kicked out of the tribe?
I think it's probably more of like, I would think that somebody just had like a traumatic experience about like trying to fit in at that time, and maybe they feel better about themselves now, and they're like, I can't believe I wasted all this time doing that, and feeling hurt about those feelings, rather than just going like laughing them off or going dismissing them like, well, I should have done that better, but like sort of letting those feelings bog them down instead. So I think that brings up a lot of issues with people. I mean, I think the best thing to do is just go like, yeah, that was me, and try to laugh it off. I mean, that's what that's where that bit came from about all that high school stuff. Like that stuff was like stuff that I wouldn't want to tell anybody. And if you turn it into a bit and let other people laugh at it, it makes it so much easier to deal with, and you just laugh at yourself about it. Because again, it's like nobody cares. No one remembers that stuff. Like everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody's worried about themselves, and like nobody's thinking about you. It's fine.
Yeah.
You do have your people who haven't left their hometown though, so that it's very real.
Well, those are the people where high school was awesome. for them. Like they're just holding on to that. Like,
they still go to the football games every Friday.
You know, the people that peaked in high school. That's I'm so glad I watched enough movies and stuff as like a kid, probably movies that I shouldn't have seen, where I knew that was like a thing, that there was like a guy who was going to be the town guy who was like the shit in high school, who who was going to be the guy who worked at his dad's used car lot, right? Like he was never going to leave. And I was lucky enough to know that like you didn't have to care about that guy now because he's not going to be anything in 10 years or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know if everybody has that. I don't know if everybody had HBO when they went to high school at the time.
Yeah, they're the wrestling coach now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
I could have made steak.
There's plenty of people that work at my high school that went to my high school, which more power to them. I could never do that.
Yeah. I mean, now I've been in New York long enough now that I want to leave, but like, I'm glad I left. I'm glad I went elsewhere to do other things. It's like life's too short to stay in Palm Bay, Florida. You know?
Yeah, but every once in a while you'll get reminded of those moments in high school and the things that have happened, and that's going to take us into another clip from your album. This is the I have it on another document. I have so many things everywhere in front of me. Jeremy, it's the other clip, the second clip that I sent you.
I've been looking up people from Facebook. One person in particular, this girl named and the reason I looked her up, wow, I should have changed her name for this album. The reason I looked her up was, it just occurred, just bleep that. Like, just bleep whatever name I said there. She was one of the most popular girls in high school. And, oh shit. She was one of the most popular girls in high school, right? And as we've established, I was invisible in high school, right? And on the last 5 minutes of high school, the last 5 minutes of my senior year, this kid came up to me, Greg Warner. He goes, I should have changed his name too. He comes up to me. He comes up to me and he goes, I heard a rumor that you got head from. I was like, what? Why am I finding out about this now? You know how much social capital you could get from that through high school if people think that the hottest girl in school is blowing you? That's crazy. That's like finding out you owned a bunch of Blockbuster videos in the 90s today. Like, there's nothing you can do with that information. It's worthless. So he told me about that, the bell rang, and I could do nothing with it. So I looked her up recently, and I started messaging her. She's dating a girl now, which is great. And I was messaging her. I was like, hey, how you doing? Is it like me from high school? She's like, oh, I see you do comedy and shit. I'm like, yeah, it's going okay. And we go back and forth. And at some point, I asked her, you know what? Before I get off, I want to ask this question. And I go, hey, did you ever hear a rumor about us? And she goes, that I gave you head? And I was like, yeah? And she goes, yeah, I made that up. I was like, why'd you do that? And she goes, well, I was very uncomfortable with my sexuality. I didn't want anybody to know I was a lesbian in high school, so I just made up a lie so people would think I was straight. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, why'd you pick me? And she goes, I don't know. I just picked the gay kid from prom. She's like, I figured if people thought he was getting blown, he wouldn't shoot up the school. Like, a weirdo kid.
The audience didn't give that joke what it deserved, man.
Thanks. Well, thank you.
That's a good callback.
You know what sucks about that is we recorded that, and then like a week later, the album was done, and then like a week later, I went into Jersey and did pretty much that material because it was like I still had an hour to do, and I did all that material, and it fucking killed harder than it was like better than the album show, and I was like, damn it! Like even my producer was like, oh man, I kind of want it would be kind of nice if we got this show. And that was one of the bits that I was like, it would have been nicer to get. But yeah, they were a little light on that one. But that was one that was consistently doing well. And that I think that night is just you never know what it's going to be when you record something like that.
Right.
I'll tell you what, if I ever record Uh, David. It took me a minute. Bill, I was like, what's happening? Am I paralyzed?
He's like 9.
No, Bill offered to like help produce one of my albums or an album, but then, COVID hit, but I think I'm still going to do it. I just need to like get the momentum back going. But anyways, what I'm saying is, I would like to record like 4 recordings. I mean, I will record it myself with all my own gear and shit like that. So that way I can have the control freak aspect of it. And then, if the first one goes well, like I'll try it again, see, and then pick one because I'm like way too insecure to record a one-off thing.
No, I mean, well, we did too. And like, the thing was like the first audience was not as big as the second audience. And so it's like, there's like a trade-off of like, well, this did really well, but this sounds fuller. So sometimes there's some tracks that are from night 1, some tracks from night 2, but like there's a couple that are like, I mean, this one just sounds better, but like the laugh is like half as nice. Like the other one has people screaming, but this one has like, it sounds really full.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. You got to pick and choose your battles.
Yeah. I mean, I wish we could have done like 4 nights. That would have been amazing, but I'm not that big of a draw, my friend.
So the joke, I mean, it's a great bookend to the bit. I mean, it has a clear beginning and a clear end, from, the beginning of talking about you were in high school all the way to the end. Comes together great. So take us through the construction of that bit. Like, when was the moment you were like, oh, I'm going to talk about high school? And like, take us through that process of figuring out what aspects of high school, because that's 4 years of so much stuff happening.
Yeah.
How did you pick out the pieces that you did?
I kind of don't remember. Like, as far as the first stuff, I think the first high school bit I ever did was about what I just told you, Eric in high school. And that was always just like a interesting idea to me, because I remember when I first started and when I like year 1 or 2, I was like, all right, when I do my hour, it's going to have a bit about like race and technology and politics and that was like the Eric thing was going to be like my social media bit. And then it just became something else. But yeah, that was like one of the first ones. And then I started trying to like, I really don't know. It was just more like I was just talking about things from my past and like funny, just looking for little funny tidbits. And then those started coming together. And the prom thing was like, I think something like an actual thing I just told my wife. And it's just, I just thought that was just so funny and like a pretty not relatable, but definitely like a likable kind of joke to tell about like something that really happened to me. And it's kind of like a funny little bit. And then it was really just taking like all those separate ideas and then just putting them all together. Like that joke about the girl in high school. I almost said her name this time.
We just beep it.
Yeah. So that one was the joke that came pretty late. And I feel like now when I listen to that, I can hear how much later that came than all the other ones. It's like, there's a lot of stammering and like long stretches of not much going on. And then once I had that, like, cause I was just doing that bit about like the religious in high school and all that stuff before. And then once I had that, I just figured, I was like, oh, I could totally put that in and it all works. And it's all like about high school and like put a bow on it with the prom thing. And it kind of worked out. I think it's one of the few bits that I have that kind of doesn't just trail off and die. Like most of my bits just end with like, anyway, let's go on to something else. But that's like one where I actually have kind of a callback. Yeah.
It's good. And the beginning, like the prom part, like when you say that you went by yourself and then you had a friend that went by yourself and then you gave him a ride. I feel like the audience didn't catch that, but the second you said that, I laughed. I was walking my dog listening to your album a couple of weeks ago when I reached out to her, before I reached out to you. And And the second you said that, I was like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And then you play into the naivete of like being a kid and you know, not realizing what you're actually doing as you're doing it until somebody actually puts it in front of you.
Yeah, that was that's definitely, again, now that you say that, it was like that audience was like a little bit like they were a little slow on the uptick, like with a couple of things on that album, but like that one was usually when I got to that point, people go, like they're ahead of me. And it was one of my favorite things in stand-up is when the audience is a little bit ahead of you. And So I love when people have that reaction. But yeah, that's one of those things too. It's like, all right, once they're getting there and then you hit them with that thing and it's a great feeling when it works.
Absolutely. But here's the thing, though. If the audience is ahead of you, like in that case, it's great because it's not the punchline. They're not ahead of you getting the punchline.
Yeah.
This is part of the setup. This is like, now they want to know what's going to happen next. Yeah. Whereas if they're ahead of you, if they know what the punchline is before you get there, it's the total opposite reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bummer.
Yeah. So it's playing that fine line. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where if you read like the premise of an episode or something, you want to know what happens next. So you play that episode.
Yeah. And that's one. And again, like that's another one that came pretty later on, I should say, towards recording the album. Like if I wasn't recording so soon after, I would have fleshed that out like a little more. I think in that one, you can kind of hear there's like, it's like a good idea and it ends pretty strong, but like I feel like I could have done a lot more with that. I think next album, I really want to go like joke. It's just like knockout punch after knockout punch if I can. Just like joke. No room for error. That's the biggest thing I hear on this album now that I would change.
Yeah. No, it's good to because, you know, when you think of things like high school, you go back and you're like, oh, I wish I would have done this differently. I would have done this differently. But when you look back at your work, it's like, oh, I can do this differently for the next one.
Yeah. And I'm very proud of this album, but I mean, like anything you do, you're just going to have naturally things that you don't like about it. I remember when we were putting it together and we had to edit it. My producer was like, hey, we should, can you just listen to it and send it back? I was like, can we listen to it together? Cause I can't just sit in my room and listen to myself because it's not going to work. So like we got into a room and we're sitting there listening and Aaron's just like watching me. He's like, do you think this sucks? I was like, no, I think I suck. I think this is fine. I hate myself. So I can't, cause I was just like hands in my, or face in my hands the whole time, listening back to it. Just like, I hate myself. That's a good laugh. I hate myself.
Yeah. You have a good learning curve then, I guess. Cause I'm the same way. Like I hate anything I've ever done. And so that just means that you're always going to be pushing the envelope because if you're happy, you're going to get complacent. So
yeah. I mean, like it's weird. It's like I do. It's weird because the fact that I put it out is like enough for going like I think this is good, but at the same time you do have that dynamic of like, is it though? I don't know. Like I think I suck just because I know myself, but I think these jokes are okay.
I think with a lot of things, definitely delusional in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah. You got to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be a little delusional because this is the most insane career path to want to choose. To be like, hey, everybody, shut up! I'm gonna talk for an hour.
Yeah.
And pay.
Yeah.
Pay me, yeah.
Yeah, what I have to say is so important. Let me tell you about my prom. Fuck your prom. We're going to talk about mine.
Yeah, especially at a prom show. Like, fuck your prom.
Have you done a prom show?
I think I did. I don't even remember. I think I did at least one. And it wasn't great. I mean, you're just looking at these kids and they like, I'm not a dude who has stuff for them. Like, I'm not a dude who's like, all right, you ever fuck a chick and then she squirts on you? Like, that's what they're looking for. I'm like, I got a bit about politeness. Like, I got nothing for you kids. I'm so sorry. Like I'm about to have a kid and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk to him about. Like, I'm not like a person that like is good with kids in the sense that like, I know how to talk to them. So this should be an interesting endeavor.
Yeah.
And I think a theme that will always translate is just the awkwardness of searching for who we are. Like in high school, that carries over to today. You know, nobody ever really, I mean, very few people really come to a deep understanding of who they are as a human being.
Right.
I mean, you can keep digging and finding new layers of yourself. And that's, you know, that's how material like this develops, you know, as you, you know, you listen back, you're like, oh, like, I'm proud. I'm glad that I did that. It's done. I know how to do it next time. But like, now I want to explore this facet and this, like, whereas, you know, in high school, it's, you're new to the world. And I sometimes wonder what it would be like to have that same mindset today. Like, how would I approach the things that I'm facing today? And like, where can I find the humor in that? Because sometimes that helps me avoid doing that.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is just to give yourself a break. Just don't be so hard on yourself. Honestly, it's basically, you got to forgive yourself and forgive everybody else, because we're all doing this for the first time. Nobody's got to figure it out. No, everybody's scared. Everybody's, you know, worried what you're thinking about them. It's just, you know, give yourself a break, be able to laugh at yourself. If you make a stupid decision or you make a really bad, you know, if you make a dumb move, we all make dumb moves. Just go like, yeah, I made a dumb move, and here's how stupid it was.
Yeah.
You know, like, whatever it is, if you know, fell in the punch bowl at prom or whatever, I don't know, whatever humiliating scars you have, if you wear them like a badge of honor, you know, they can't hurt you. You can overpower that shit. And, you know, you can get deeply depressed about shit that you did in your life, but fuck it, man. Just, you know, it's basically just forgiving yourself, accepting yourself. And I don't know why I'm turning into fucking Tony, who's the guy that does
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins. Yeah. I almost said Tony Monroe. That's how with it I am. But yeah, it's really just about like, just, you know, someone said the person that you are at 30 is going to be is the person you're going to be your whole life. And up to 30, I was like, oh man, I got to change this. I got to change that. And once I was 30, I was like, yeah, this is just who I am. I don't like social situations. It's not that I don't like people. I'm just not going to fucking go to parties and chat up people. I'm like, that's just who I am. Yeah. I'm not going to like go, I'm going to change that about myself. It's like, no, I'm just going to accept it about myself. I'm just going to be the guy in the corner, and I'm going to be happy about it. And that's going to be it.
It sucks that we have to network in this business too. Sorry, David. You're just like, oh.
Yeah.
It like, cause like people, like you and me, I'm not too socially inclined. I'm good with people, but I don't like a lot of people. And I'm not like always trying to I do not like sucking people's dick over shit. I'm not going to try and get my weasel my way into things. I don't do that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I have that same feeling, because it feels gross and you feel like I'm only talking to this person to get something. Right. But the thing is, you got to find, you just got to find a genuine reason that you're interested in that person. Just like, because you know what, at the end of the day, like, I have this head thing. I'm a head case about that shit too. It's like, you just got to go like, I don't know, sports. Do we both like sports? Do we like fucking Marvel movies? Pro wrestling? I don't know what we both like. We'll find it somewhere, or like, just, hey man, I like your fucking jeans or something. Like, if you actually do though, but like, you know, you just got to find something to, I mean, comedy is actually, I mean, comedy's kind of easy to like, in comedy circles, it's kind of easy because comedians love talking about themselves. All you really have to do, and one thing I've learned is like, all you have to do with comedians is go, A, I like your bit, or B, just go, what are you working on? And they'll fucking tell you. Like, and just give them an ear, man. People like people who listen to them.
Yeah. We've done this for, I mean, God, you'll be our damn near 60th guest.
Oh my.
We've never run into a situation where it was like, well, now what do we talk about? Yeah. Like, you know, it's always been like one thing after the next. And I mean, that's the thing, is comedians are not like, people just love to talk about themselves. So if you can find that one thing that makes somebody's eyes light up, like,
yeah.
Me, in my case, me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but if you guys want to talk about pro wrestling, I'm totally in. So let's do it.
I'm on board. Yeah, no, we only have a few minutes left. So otherwise, I'd say let's go.
Oh, you don't have another 2 hours? All right, fine.
Yeah, it's WrestleMania season, and they're dropping the ball again. All right.
Thank God. WrestleMania redo, baby. WrestleMania redo. Poor Drew McIntyre.
What's that?
Poor Drew McIntyre. I can hijack this podcast real quick if you want.
Yeah. We'll do a wrestling episode, I'm sure. We'll have you back. It's so funny how many comics are into pro wrestling. That was something that I didn't.
There's something about pro wrestling comedy. I mean, just the fact that like if you're a certain age, you probably watched it when Stone Cold and The Rock were coming up. And now there's also like when you get into comedy, I think there's something about comedians that they wish they could be a heel and go up on the mic and just go, you fucking people suck. Fuck you. Like you trash people. But it doesn't work at all in comedy. Like I think comedians want to be a heel. And there's also the entertainment and there's sort of a similar lifestyle and traveling on the road and doing this weird character.
That's
like if you're John Cena, you're playing John Cena, but he's not really like that off stage. Like, like you're playing David Horning, but I don't know if you're really like that. Like when you're on stage, are you exactly David Horning off stage?
In some aspects, but not exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You got to put a little mustard on it, right?
Yeah,
you got to take it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no. If I talk to people like I talk to audiences on stage, they'd be like, "All right, cool. This guy's why are we talking about
manatees?"
Milk. Yeah, right.
That was one of my favorite things ever. I saw this comic. This comic was. He was pissed because like a host will bring you on. They go, "This next comic's been on VH1, MTV, or whatever it is," and like every now and then somebody will just, if you don't have credits, somebody will just make up credits for you, which I'm like I've never cared about. But for some reason, this guy goes, "This next guy's been on MTV or whatever," and blah blah blah. And the guy comes up, he goes, "I wasn't on MTV," and then he does like his bit about like raping a manatee, and I'm like, who cares if you're talking about raping a manatee? Did you do that? Because like the MTV thing is like way better.
Yeah. You can go to jail for even touching a manatee, let alone penetrating one.
I don't want to lie to the audience. Like, who gives a shit?
Right.
And then he talks about a manatee.
I just don't want MTV getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Dude, I think it's so funny. Like, comics who want their credits to be just right, like make sure you get my credits. Like the audience isn't going to be like, hold on, I'm going to look you up and like be your biggest fan. Like they don't care. Like
when Chris Rock shows up at the Comedy Cellar, he doesn't go, "Hey, can you tell them I was in Head of State?"
Yeah.
He just goes, "Don't tell them I'm Chris Rock," basically, until I'm on stage. It's always the guy who was on an episode of House of Cards who wants you to know he was on House of Cards.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He was a background actor for like 5
exactly.
seconds.
Yeah.
He like he just like handed Claire some files and walked away.
If we had more time, I'd rant about background actors.
I mean, aren't we all background actors in someone else's life?
Yeah, you're right. Truman Show.
Man. So let's close it out. As far as like, somebody who's working on a bit about how when they were in high school, what is a piece of advice that you would give somebody who's trying to find the funny in their high school experience and communicate that with others?
Be honest, be specific. And be specific. Most importantly, be specific about your feelings about the situation. If you do that, people will relate to it. If you tell, if you have a crazy story about, how you, killed a man in high school, if you tell what you felt about it, people will be compelled.
Yeah.
Rather than just telling a stupid story about, whatever. I made a touchdown in high school. Like, you got to find a way to make that story interesting to other people. Why? That's basically what it is. It's like figure out what's interesting to you about it and find a way to get that information from your brain to somebody else's brain.
Very good. Do you think people should be held accountable for what they did in high school today? For example, did you see that the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue got canned because of tweets from when she was 17.
Yeah, that's a little unfair. That's a little unfair. I mean, you got to give people a break, but it's people are looking for scalps.
Unless you're the Kenosha shooter, I think you deserve a break.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. If you're a Columbine kid, you might not want to.
It's like, what were you doing when you were 17? I was planning a mass execution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you might want to give those guys life, but
yeah, he's just a kid.
Yeah. I mean, if I had Twitter back then, like I was saying, I'd be such a great person. I'd be so much more popular, but I'd be so much more cancelable right now. Like infinitely more cancelable if I had Twitter and when I was 17.
My Facebook statuses from when I was in college are awful. I couldn't even imagine my high school ones. Like,
dude, like but that's the thing though. It's like the thing that was like the limits of what was acceptable was so different. Like you got to understand when I went to high school, like Maxim was like cool. Like celebrities like Jessica Alba posed for like Maxim. Like high class celebrities were like basically naked, and it was like awesome. And American Pie was like the #1 movie, and the whole thing. Like we always joke about this in our podcast, where like 2002 was like Puddle of Mud, and like the Budweiser commercial were like and twins. Like a joke in 2002 was like sex with twins is the best. Like it's like the highest sexual mark you could get is like having sex with twins.
Yeah.
That's different times, man.
So give people from that generation a break.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. A good message from our guest, Cristian Duran. Cristian, plugs. What are you working on? Where can we find you on social media?
Cristian Duran SVP on Instagram, C Duran on Twitter, ChristianDuranComedy.com for all your Cristian Duran needs. My Cartoon Future Hall of Famers is on there. King Latifah is on Spotify, iTunes, all your streaming platforms. Just check that out. Make sure it's Christian with no H. And yeah, I'm working on more cartoons, more stand-up when we can actually do real stand-up. And and the Oh Dear podcast. If you listen to this podcast, you probably heard Brett Raybould on. And he and I and my other friend, Nick Whitmer, every week we talk about the things that would make your mother clutch her pearls and go, oh dear. So yeah, check that out. Oh Dear podcast and all your streaming stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate you joining us. Steve, anything else you want to throw in?
I don't have any parting words.
No parting words.
But I enjoyed this podcast,
right.
So it was fun.
I agree. And Cristian, thank you for joining us to help us prove that no matter how traumatic it could have been, no matter how awkward and a learning experience it was, whether you're reading your Bible in your car or going with another guy to prom and not realizing the optics of it, you can.
See, I would be a hero now.
You would be.
I was a pioneer, actually.
You would be. And we just proved that you can laugh at that.
You can't laugh at that.